Hi, this is Hyperwave. I'm Leah Wald here with Tyler Jenks and starting back up this Monday. Happy Monday. And wow, okay, look at that, opening bell. So we are going to obviously be looking at price action of Bitcoin. We had our weekly close yesterday, of course, but also a bit about the SEC. As if you guys followed, Tone had quite a interesting marathon. He is incredible, and it was insane that he did that on my behalf of being in surgery. Unfortunately, there was complications with the surgery, so he kept going for 6.5 hours, which is insane. So huge thank you to you, Tone. And Tyler watched the whole thing. So this is going to be so much fun, especially for me, given that I obviously didn't watch much of it until afterwards, and I probably didn't understand what I was watching post-surgery. So probably get a little synopsis, but also what Tyler's thinking, because it's a very nuanced argument, and also we have a lot of opinions there. So I'm very excited. So more than that, we're going to talk about Hyperwave. Of course, this is our channel, but in a very specific, different way. First of all, just to say that, you know, we are so appreciative of everything that you guys are doing. You know, we have the most amazing fans ever, and Tyler and I talk about this every single day of just how grateful we are to you guys. And now huge shout out to Sweet Pig and just, you know, we'll say more over the days, the next upcoming days, but just I can't tell you, and Tyler will as well, just how appreciative we are of the community that you guys are, and how supportive you've been, and how brilliant you've been, and just you know, you guys are the ones that are really also making this happen. And I think that, you know, and then I'll stop rambling, Ty. But when we started, we had it was just a hope and a dream that maybe 3 people would listen, and like our goal was like by the end of the month more than just our family would tune in. and now the fact that not only do we have listeners, but such brilliant listeners who you know, we've been able to connect with. And as Tyler's been saying, that yes, you guys get to know us, but the cool thing is we're finally getting to know you a bit more. And I just, I feel blessed by that. So my ramble's done, but thank you guys. And you are so brilliant. You guys teach me TA. So I will stop and turn it over to Tyler. Ty.
Great. Thank you very much, Leah. Everything she just said. What we're going to do very quickly, we'll try to keep this to about 30 minutes. Because I do want to just make some comments on the SEC controversy, and I do want to make some comments about Hyperwave, and then I want to get into details about Bitcoin, because to me some interesting things are going to happen. I haven't had time to really go through all my Bitcoin charts this morning, but my sense is by the end of this, I'm going to change my mind about my short-term targets on Bitcoin, but we'll do that together. I'll show you how I go through that thought process. Okay, back to the SEC. First of all, thank you, Tone, very much from my participation in the ecosystem for what you did. First of all, supporting Leah and letting people know what was going on with Leah. But from the perspective of our ecosystem, that was one heck of a brilliant show. And what I would like every follower to do, if you didn't get to listen to the show, is at least listen to the first hour. It goes on for about 6.5 hours. There's a lot of repetition. But what Tone brilliantly did is he kept bringing in new people, and the most qualified people, in my opinion, in the space in various ways. Not that they agreed with each other, they never did. 2 or 3 of them would agree on certain things and 2 or 3 on other things. But the level of discussion was you would have to pay $2,500 to go to a conference to listen to these guys, and you'd only get to listen to them for 20 minutes. Here for 6.5 hours, they beat each other over the heads, both literally and figuratively, in terms of the arguments that they deeply believed in. But it wasn't just belief, it was their knowledge of the law, their knowledge of ICOs. Just, a shout out to Bruce Fenton and Simon Dixon and Adela. Charles Hoskinson, I had never really heard him speak before. One of the original co-founders, really, of Ethereum. Jeez, you are so impressive in terms of what you know and how you can articulate it. I will go back and listen to everything you've ever done. Disagree with some things, but not many, which surprised me. Drew Hinkes, David Silver, if I ever get into a class action suit, that's somebody I want on my side. But the discussions of the Howey test, of money, service, business, KYC, AML, the origination of ICOs, can ICOs that were securities over time change into something else, which is basically what I heard the SEC say. I apologize for my appearance. I was doing it with a handheld iPhone, and it looked like we were going through an earthquake, I'm sure, and everybody probably got seasick watching it. I did make some very good points, however, if I say so myself, that others were not making, and that's why I appreciate Tone allowing me to make them. I was trying to be very practical from the point of view of someone that has worked with all of the named regulators, but from the other side, trying to understand what I needed to do, what I had to do, what the consequences were if I didn't do them, from the point of view of an institutional money manager. And so I didn't have any skin in the game as a lawyer that is representing someone might have, or as Charles had, because he's so closely tied with the Ethereum project, or was. He is not any longer. He's got this great international company, Input Output. But anyway, great job, Tone. It's got to go down as one of the 5 most important things over the last 10 years that has occurred for the ecosystem in terms of information flow. Fabulous job. Okay, I want to get to Bitcoin, so I'm going to go to screen share because I want to walk us all through this together. So what we're going to look at is we will start with the big picture of Bitcoin from 1,000 to 20,000 and back to where we are today. On the right-hand side in green, you see where we are, 64.25. We've been drifting down on a weekly basis. We made the point, you're looking at the Fibonacci lines. Thank you for those people that have been sending me information of Fibonacci and Bitcoin using different starting points. I'm looking through those now, but as Leah said, the more other people begin to analyze and understand and try to get into what these hyperwaves really are saying, and how things like Fibonacci can give us some clues about what they are saying, the better for everyone. I'd love it if everybody starts finding and using their own hyperwaves and making a ton of money using the rules. And we're going to talk about that at the very end of this show. So right now, nothing has really changed other than we are putting in a candle this week. This is Monday, so it only started last night at 8 o'clock. But it again is a red candle. Tone is looking for some more weeks down to the downside. This is the target 78.6 on Fibonacci, which comes in around 49.28. Tone is looking for 49.75. I'm squeaking above 5,000 now on my phase 2 line, but all three of those things are suggesting that any movement down below this 6,000 level is going to take us down right around that 5,000 level, the Fibonacci. Now, you notice when you look at Fibonacci breaks from the top down that they often go well below the lines before they turn around. It happened here and here and here and here and here and here. The Fibonacci wicks, I would call them, are those parts of candles that are breaking in a bear market from the top through the Fibonacci lines and keep on going. And they often are points at which the bear market turns around and goes back the other way. I'm hoping that's what we see if we get down here to the 49.28 level on Bitcoin, which is the 78.6 Fibonacci line. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into an analysis of where we actually are. Here's the 1-day chart from the last high of 99.49. This is not looking good because we're forming this pattern that to me looks like it's going to break to the downside because of this last candle that began at 8 o'clock last night Eastern time. What I mean by that is you can see visually just this little uptrend in the past 5 days off the bottom at 61.20. We have broken that slightly to the downside. We've got declining tops forming this triangle. And I was hoping and thinking and believing, partly on the part of the SEC announcement, that there would be more of a reaction over the weekend to the upside, maybe as high as 7,000 out of that pattern. Now it appears that we are actually coming down. I will not fight price. I will fight fundamentals such as the SEC statement, but I do not discount them. And it appears as if my enthusiasm for a bounce up to the 7,000 level is running into a lot of problems. So that's my working assumption now. So let's break it down. Let's see when we get to the end of the analysis if I feel the same way. Here's the weekly chart. I will throw on the things that I believe are the most important in defining downtrends and uptrends. There's the stop and reverse point. We've got to get above 8,300 this week before that is no longer a tremendous burden for prices going up. On the 3-day, we need to get above 70, let's call it 77.50 in order to turn the 3-day positive. On the 1-day, we need to get, and I thought we might, up to 72.92. Now I'm beginning to doubt that. On the 12-hour, all we need to do is to get to 6,700. And when now we break it down into this 12-hour, you can see that the triangle itself is still extending and can still break either way. We do have a tiny green showing up in this 12-hour period, but at this point, that isn't particularly conclusive. Let's look at the 6 hour. The 6 hour has broken all the way back here and has been in an uptrend ever since. I would think that a break of that to the downside would be important for me to change from short-term positive back to neutral. And that comes in at 63.88 approximately. So if on the shorter term time frame we drop down below 63.88, about 50 points lower than we're trading right now, that will turn this short-term run of 1, 2, 3, 1 day, 1, 2, 3, 2 days, of about 4 or 5 days back to the downside. And that would be enough to get me to get out of my short-term positive. That has already occurred on the 4 hour. It occurred 4 periods ago, and that is now down. That leads me to suspect that we are going to see that on the 6 hour. And so I might jump ahead of the 6 hour simply based on what the 4 hour is telling me. Obviously, the 2 hour has done the same thing. And now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4 hours of 4 hours worth, 8 hours worth of downside action. And we had this one candle attempt to come up high enough to penetrate. It failed, and now we're getting further and further away from it. That is negative action to me. So let's take a look at something else. Let's look at the moving averages, go back to the weekly. This is looking bad. Why? For the first time, I can visually see at the top on the long-term moving average what Tone and I have been calling for, which is as we drop off these big high numbers week by week, this is going to turn to the downside and accelerate. We have done that. The long-term moving average, in this case a 30-week, is now headed down. The intermediate term of 7-week has been headed down for a long time, but notice it accelerating. The short term has been up and down as it does. As these pulses take place, it turns up. As the pulses go back down, it goes down. And now we are in a configuration in which the long term, the intermediate term, and the short term are all going down. The long term is above the intermediate term going down. The intermediate term is above the short term going down. And all three of them are above the price as we sit here right at this second. Even the short term activity is taking place right at or below the short term. That is the definition of a bear market. We've only been in that on a couple of occasions in this massive bear market, but we're back in it again. Everything is now pointing to the downside. That makes me nervous about the short term. Let's take a look at the 3-day. The 3-day is in the exact same position. The 1-day is in the exact same position. We could get across of the short term above the intermediate term with any upside action from here. What the 1-day does not need is for price to break down on those SARs at the 6-hour level, because that will turn the short term back down, and then we will get a big acceleration. I don't need to go shorter term on that. That's very clear in my mind. Bollinger Bands, we don't have time today, but this is a academic work in progress that should be studied by everyone. I mean, Bitcoin, Bollinger Bands, this bear market, and where we've been for the last 2 or 3 weeks. it's giving you so much information about how powerful a tool Bollinger can be. What I'm talking about is this walking down the baseline of the Bollinger Bands, attempting to get back up to the middle and failing, walking down again, finally getting back up, but being unable to decisively close above it, and then failing. And at that point, look at what the bands do. The lower band makes it more and more difficult to stay with it because it's dropping so fast. The upper band climbs, getting further and further away from any possibility of getting back up to it. And the midline keeps coming down at a fairly consistent level. But think of what that means. It means the price, if it can get back up to the midline, is going to have to either break it or fall back below a declining line, and now it's got to drop even further just to get back to that lower line again. So that is very negative in my mind for the future of Bitcoin. I'm going to take a quick look at the MACD. Still negative, but the histogram is actually getting better because the price has flattened out again. That's on a daily basis. On the weekly basis, it is not getting better. It is negative. The distance between the two moving averages is about constant, but we are lower today on the histogram than we were 2 weeks ago, about the same as we were a week ago. To me, that is negative. Let's look at a little shorter time period, 3-day, just flat, really. I would call that more neutral, even though it's in negative territory, not getting worse, not getting better. And on the 1 day, getting better on the 1 day. Because by going flat, you relieve the pressure between these two moving averages. And so I would consider that to be neutral, but neutral from the perspective of being in a negative territory. There's still a spread between the lines. We've still got negative histograms. It's just not getting any worse until we break, either up or down. Okay, so that very quick review leads me to believe that the possibility of a move up out of this area has diminished greatly. I was looking for a 5% move up. I will officially say I'm going back to neutral for now, and I could turn negative with even a small $50 to $100 drop in Bitcoin prices today. So I will post that on Twitter later, just for record-keeping purposes. And now what I'd like to do is I would like to jump back off and okay, and talk about Hyperwave. But Hyperwave from the perspective of community involvement. I've been thanking a lot of people, but there's been growing contributions by a number of sources of looking for and exploring hyperwaves. I apologize that I can't get back to all of you, but on each of those subjects, every one that you send me, I build a file on and I begin studying it. What I would like to say, though, is there has been a movement on the part of several people to make this a community event. And I appreciate that. That will be very helpful for all of us in terms of understanding and helping you to invest your own monies on things that you have seen using the rules of Hyperwave. Some of you have been sending Hyperwaves that are basically gone through the entire process, and so become something that we can archive. 3D Systems is one of those. Thank you very much for the individual that sent that. It's DDD is the ticker on it. Take a look at his work, do your own work on it, but it's a wonderful example of a completed hyperwave with all 7 steps in it. Too bad we didn't catch it on the way up. Too bad those of you that like to short things didn't catch it on the way down. Maybe you did for other reasons, using other technical systems. But there is another example of how you could have made a lot of money going up. You could have known exactly where to get out before it turned down. And those of you that like to short things, you could have made a lot of money coming down. That's what Hyperwave allows you to do. What I would like to say is, when you do your analysis, please remember the basic rules. And almost everyone that is sending in these examples are doing that. But the basic rules are that all the price activity must be below on a weekly closing basis on a non-log chart, an arithmetic chart on a weekly closing basis. The price must be below a phase 1 line without exception. A number of you are sending your phase 1 lines with the price above it, and it looks the same, but that's a different thing. It's important to understand how long the phase 1 was valid in terms of building the hyperwave. And the only way you can answer that question is doing what the rule says. Make sure that every one of the weekly posting closes is below the phase 1 line. The phase 5 line, all prices on a weekly basis must be below the phase 5 line. On the phase 7 line, all weekly postings must be below the phase 7 line. In all other cases, 2, 3, 4, and 6, all of the weekly postings must be above those phase lines, because that's the signal you get when either a phase is broken or a phase is accelerating to the next phase. So remember again, weekly closing basis, either below or above for every posting. And don't use log charts. Use log charts for everything else, including looking back at hyperwaves. It gives you some more information, but it has nothing to do with the system itself. And if you just use those basic rules, it will answer a lot of your questions about is this or is this not the potential of a hyperwave. Point 2 I wanted to make was I'm very happy to see all of the potential hyperwaves, either in phase 1, 2, or 3, that people are beginning to post. And a couple that came in over the weekend that said, can we consider this a hyperwave? And I will talk more about that in a separate vlog where we will put all of these hyperwaves together and we will go through them. All of these meaning those that you have found that I have not been looking at other than privately with someone that has asked me to look at them through our consulting side. But I have seen a couple that have just moved from phase 2 to phase 3. That is what makes it a hyperwave. Phase 1 and 2 is not a hyperwave. Once you go from 2 to 3, you are in a hyperwave, and that's where it gets exciting, because now you've got all of 3 to the upside, all of 4, and you know where the end is going to be when you move from 4 to 5. And what's the definition of that? A weekly close below 4. It's very precise, no guessing. So you've got all these great rules that it's taken a long time to work out, and now the community is beginning to understand how it all works. And now we're getting the idea of the community working together. And there will be some announcements about that in the future where we can all work together. And it's getting very exciting. That's why I posted over the weekend or last week how ecstatic I am, as Leah said, that when we started on this journey 4.5 months ago, we were hoping that this would be the outcome, but we had no idea that we would have the quality of consideration by the best people in this ecosystem. Best meaning not mean-spirited, meaning articulate, meaning willing to work and think for themselves and others and share it. It's just more than we could ask for, and we fully appreciate it. And I'm running a little bit over, but I'd like to throw it back to Leah. She did not get, of course, an opportunity to listen live to the marathon on the SEC, and I haven't had a chance to talk to her. No one else has except her surgeons and nurses and everybody else, and we wish her the very best. But I'd be very interested to hear her ideas about that SEC announcement, just because she is so close to all of this with her work with Tone and Jimmy and Giacomo on the morning brief, that she's got sort of a better picture of the news front than any of us, certainly me. And I try to listen to every one of them, but there's not very many people that are closer to the day-to-day workings of this ecosystem. So I'd love to hear what she has to say.
Oh, thanks, Ty. I do have a lot of thoughts on it, obviously. I think, and if it's okay, that I would love to share them tomorrow, just given the timing and the fact that the boys want to do the morning brief pretty quickly. I'm getting these messages right now.
Great.
But thanks for evoking me. And yeah, I think the different perspective that I'll have is that being in Washington, D.C. and being so close with the regulators and just having, you know, I'll stop it there. Yes, I definitely.
Great. We'll do it tomorrow if you're up for it. And maybe what we'll do is we'll just spend a whole fireside chat sort of show where you and I can get into it in some detail.
I'd love that. I'd love that. All right, everybody have a great day. Thank you so much. And till tomorrow.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.